the sea screamed, not with the roar of storm winds or crashing waves, but with something deeper, something that made the very waters themselves recoil in terror. Far beneath the Mediterranean's sun-kissed surface, where light had never dared to venture, a crimson darkness spread like spilled wine through the abyssal depths. The ocean floor trembled as droplets of divine blood, thick, luminous, and burning with cosmic power, descended through the water like falling stars. Kronos had done the unthinkable. The Titan King, wild-eyed and desperate, had raised his adamantine sickle against his own father. Uranus, the sky itself, had fallen, and now his severed essence drifted downward through the endless blue, each drop carrying within it the raw, untamed power of creation. The sea creatures fled in panic. Ancient leviathans that had slumbered for millennia awakened with terrified bellows, their massive forms thrashing as they sensed the approaching transformation. Schools of fish moved like liquid silver, desperate to escape the spreading influence of divine blood. Even the coral polyps, those patient builders of underwater kingdoms, sealed themselves tight in their calcium fortresses, sensing that what was coming would change everything. But the blood would not be denied its destiny. As the crimson drops touched the sea foam, that delicate dance of air and water where the ocean kissed the sky, something extraordinary began to happen. The foam, usually so ephemeral and fleeting, began to glow. Each bubble caught fire with an inner light, transforming from pristine white to the softest rose gold. The very molecules of water seemed to sing, vibrating with a frequency that resonated through every living thing in the ocean. The transformation was mesmerizing, terrifying, beautiful beyond mortal comprehension. The glowing foam began to swirl, drawn together by forces older than the gods themselves. It moved with purpose, with intention, forming spirals that pulsed with the rhythm of a cosmic heartbeat. The sea itself seemed to hold its breath, waves stilling to mirror like perfection, as something unprecedented took shape within the dancing sea foam. First came the suggestion of form, curves that caught the light like mother of pearl, contours that spoke of perfection beyond imagining. The foam thickened, becoming substantial, warm, alive. What had been chaos was becoming order. What had been destruction was becoming creation. The blood of the sky was birthing something new in the embrace of the sea. And then she breathed. The sound was like the first dawn breaking over primordial waters, like the whisper of wind through virgin olive groves. It was the sound of beauty itself drawing its first breath, and every creature in the ocean felt their hearts skip in response. The foam parted like curtains, revealing what lay within. She was radiant. Her skin glowed with the soft luminescence of pearls, catching and reflecting light that seemed to come from within her very being. Hair like spun gold cascaded around her shoulders, each strand moving with its own liquid grace as if touched by invisible breezes. Her eyes, oh, her eyes, held depths that rivaled the ocean itself, blue-green and infinite, filled with ancient wisdom and newfound wonder. But it was her smile that made the very cosmos pause in its turning. It was joy incarnate, love given form, the promise of every beautiful thing that had ever been or ever would be. When she smiled, the sea around her burst into effervescent celebration, foam and spray dancing in spirals of pure delight. She was Aphrodite, born not of woman, but of divine violence, transformed into transcendent beauty, the goddess of love, rising from the very place where destruction had tried to reign supreme as she floated in her cradle of seafoam, still glowing with the power of her miraculous birth. Aphrodite felt the ocean's embrace with wondering delight. The water was warm against her new skin, welcoming her like a mother's arms. She could feel the pulse of every living thing in the sea, the excited flutter of dolphin hearts, the steady wisdom of whale songs, the nervous energy of darting fish schools. Everything was so vivid, so intensely alive. Every sensation was electric, thrilling, overwhelming in its newness. The taste of salt on her lips was like the first bite of forbidden fruit. The feeling of water flowing through her fingers was pure magic. The sight of sunlight fracturing through the waves above filled her with such joy that she laughed, a sound like silver bells that made the dolphins leap with excitement. But beneath the overwhelming wonder, she felt something else stirring, a purpose vast and mysterious, pulsing within her divine essence. She was born for something magnificent, something that would touch every corner of creation. Love itself had taken flesh in her, and love demanded to be shared, to grow, to transform everything it touched. The sea around her seemed to sense this cosmic significance. Schools of fish began to gather, their scales glinting like scattered jewels as they swam in reverent circles around their new goddess. Dolphins approached with playful curiosity, their intelligent eyes bright with recognition of her divine nature. Even the ancient sea turtles, those wise wanderers of the deep, changed course to witness this miraculous birth. The water itself responded to her presence, becoming clearer, more beautiful. Coral bloomed in her wake, painting the seafloor in brilliant colors. Pearls formed spontaneously in nearby oysters, each one perfectly round and lustrous. The very chemistry of the ocean seemed to shift, becoming more hospitable to life, more conducive to beauty and growth. As Aphrodite marveled at these changes, she felt the first stirrings of her divine power. It was like music made manifest, like poetry given physical form. She could sense the connections between all living things, the delicate threads of attraction and affection that bound creatures together. She felt the longing of the seahorses for their mates, the fierce, protective love of sharks for their young, the complex social bonds that held dolphin pods together. And she wanted to touch it all, to strengthen these bonds, to weave them into something even more beautiful. Love was not meant to be contained. It was meant to flow, to grow, to spread like ripples across the surface of existence. But first, she needed to understand this new world she had been born into, with graceful movements that seemed to flow like water itself. Aphrodite began to swim toward the surface. The seafoam that had been her birthplace followed her, trailing behind like a bridal train made of liquid starlight. Fish and sea creatures formed an impromptu procession, all eager to escort their newborn goddess toward her first glimpse of the world above. As she rose through the layers of the sea, Aphrodite felt the water pressure change, felt the light growing stronger and more golden. The excitement was almost unbearable. Every nerve in her divine form was alive with anticipation. What would she find above? What wonders awaited in the realm of air and light? The surface grew closer, and she could see it now. A ceiling of rippling silver that promised transformation. Beyond it lay a completely different realm, one filled with mysteries she had never imagined. Her heart raced with the thrill of discovery, with the intoxicating prospect of the unknown. With one final powerful stroke, Aphrodite broke through the surface of the Mediterranean Sea. The sensation was indescribable. Air, sweet, warm air, touched her face for the first time. Sunlight, unfiltered by water, caressed her skin with golden fingers. The vast dome of the sky stretched above her, painted in shades of blue, so pure and endless that she gasped with wonder. But it was the feeling of the wind that truly amazed her. It played through her hair like invisible hands, carried scents she had never imagined, salt and cypress, wild herbs and blooming flowers from distant shores. The wind brought her messages from the world beyond the sea, whispers of lands yet to be explored, of mortals and immortals who had never felt the touch of true love. As she floated on the surface, still surrounded by her train of glowing seafoam, Aphrodite felt her divine nature responding to this new environment. The air itself seemed to shimmer around her, filled with an almost visible aura of beauty and desire. Birds began to circle overhead, graceful seabirds whose cries echoed with newfound longing. The goddess looked toward the horizon and saw something that made her heart leap with excitement. Land. In the distance, she could see the outline of an island, its shores gleaming white in the afternoon sun. Something deep within her divine essence called to that place, recognizing it as her destined home. But as she prepared to swim toward her new domain, Aphrodite paused, looking back at the depths from which she had emerged. The sea had been her first mother, the foam her first embrace. She would never forget this moment of birth, this emergence from chaos into beauty, from destruction into love. With a smile that could have melted glaciers, she sent a pulse of gratitude deep into the ocean's heart. Wherever she went, whatever divine purposes awaited her, she would carry the sea's gift with her, the ability to transform violence into beauty, hatred into love, chaos into the most perfect harmony. The Mediterranean sparkled around her like a carpet of diamonds, and Aphrodite, goddess of love newly born, began to swim toward her extraordinary destiny. The island called to her with a voice older than memory. As Aphrodite swam through the crystalline waters, her divine form cutting through the waves. Like living silk, she felt the pull growing stronger with each stroke. The island ahead, Cyprus, though she did not yet know its name, seemed to glow with its own inner light, as if recognizing the approach of its destined mistress. The sea foam that had birthed her continued to trail behind in luminous spirals, creating a wake of pure enchantment that transformed everything it touched. Schools of flying fish burst from the water around her, their silver wings catching the sunlight as they danced through the air in joyous celebration. Dolphins raced alongside her, their sleek bodies cutting through the waves with playful grace. While beneath the surface, whales sang songs of welcome that resonated through the ocean depths. The very sea itself seemed to part before her, creating smooth passages through which she glided with effortless beauty. As she drew closer to the shore, Aphrodite could see more details of her new domain. The island was a masterpiece of natural beauty. White limestone cliffs rose majestically from sapphire waters, topped with groves of ancient olive trees whose silver-green leaves whispered secrets in the coastal breeze. Wildflowers carpeted the hillsides in riots of color. Scarlet poppies, golden chrysanthemums, and deep purple lavender, that perfumed the air with their intoxicating fragrance. But it was the beach itself that took her breath away. The sand was like powdered pearls, so fine and white it seemed to glow with its own inner radiance. The shoreline curved in a perfect crescent, embraced by arms of weathered stone that created a natural amphitheater facing the sea. Ancient cypress trees stood sentinel along the beach, their dark silhouettes etched against the azure sky like elegant brushstrokes on a divine canvas. As her feet touched the sandy bottom of the shallows, Aphrodite felt a tremor of power run through the earth itself. The island recognized her, welcomed her, prepared to transform itself into a suitable home for the goddess of love. Where her feet touched the sand, tiny flowers began to bloom, delicate sea daisies and beach morning glories that had never existed before this moment. Born from the intersection of divine beauty and mortal earth, she rose from the waves like a vision from dreams mortals had not yet learned to dream. Water cascaded from her perfect form in sheets of liquid silver, each droplet catching the light and creating miniature rainbows that danced in the air around her. Her golden hair, now kissed by both sea and sun, flowed around her shoulders like a mantle woven from sunset itself. The seafoam clung to her skin like the finest silk, gradually dissolving into mist that sparkled with otherworldly light. The moment her feet touched dry sand, Cyprus itself awakened. The transformation was immediate and breathtaking. Trees that had stood barren suddenly burst into bloom, their branches heavy with flowers that released clouds of pollen like golden snow. Springs of crystal clear water bubbled up from the earth, creating streams that meandered toward the sea in patterns that spelled out words of love in languages not yet invented. The very air grew thick with the perfume of jasmine and rose, as if the atmosphere itself had been transformed into a love potion. Birds began to gather, not just the seabirds that had followed her from the water, but creatures from every corner of the island. Doves descended from the sky in graceful spirals, their white wings catching the light as they settled on the sand around her. Swans glided across the newly formed pools with regal elegance, while nightingales perched in the flowering trees and began to sing melodies so beautiful they would inspire poets for millennia to come. But it was not just the natural world that responded to her presence. Deep in the heart of the island, in caves that had slumbered since the world's creation, ancient magic stirred. Crystals began to glow with soft inner light, their faceted surfaces reflecting her beauty in infinite variations. Precious metals veined through the stone began to sing with harmonious frequencies, creating a symphony that resonated through the very bones of the earth. Aphrodite walked further onto the beach, her bare feet leaving impressions in the sand that filled with pools of seawater, so clear they reflected the sky like mirrors. With each step, she felt her connection to this place growing stronger, felt her divine nature settling into the landscape like a key finding its perfect lock. This island would be her sanctuary, her temple, her gift to the world, a place where love could flourish in all its forms. As she moved inland, exploring her new domain, Aphrodite discovered wonders that filled her with delight. Hidden groves where the trees grew in perfect circles, their branches intertwining to create natural chambers filled with soft grass and flowers. Pools fed by underground springs, their waters so pure and warm they seemed designed for bathing beneath the stars. meadows where the grass grew in patterns that resembled intricate lacework, each blade perfectly placed as if arranged by divine hands. But perhaps most remarkable were the gardens that began to appear wherever she lingered, not planted by any mortal hand. These were spontaneous creations born from her divine essence. Roses that bloomed in colors never seen before, their petals soft as silk and fragrant as heaven itself. Vines that bore fruits sweet enough to make the gods weep with pleasure. Herbs whose very scent could heal broken hearts and inspire the deepest passion. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that seemed to echo her own radiant beauty, Aphrodite found herself at the island's highest point. From here, she could see the entire Mediterranean spread out before her like a vast blue tapestry, dotted with islands that gleamed like scattered jewels in the dying light. And for the first time since her birth, she felt the full weight of her divine purpose settling upon her shoulders. She was not just beautiful. She was beauty itself, given form and consciousness. She was not just capable of love. She was love incarnate, the divine force that would bind all creation together in webs of attraction and affection. Her birth from violence and chaos had been no accident. It was a cosmic necessity, the universe's way of ensuring that destruction would always give way to creation, that hatred would always be overcome by love. Standing there on her sacred mountain, with the wind playing through her golden hair and the scent of her magical gardens perfuming the air around her, Aphrodite felt the first stirrings of her true power. It was vast beyond imagining, encompassing not just romantic love, but every form of attraction and connection that bound living beings together. The love between parent and child, the loyalty between friends, the passion between lovers, the bond between mortal and divine. All of these fell within her domain, but with power came responsibility, and she sensed that her influence would not always be gentle. Love could be a destructive force as well as a creative one. Passion could lead to madness, desire could spark wars, beauty could inspire both worship and jealousy. She would need to learn to wield her gifts with wisdom, to understand when to fan the flames of love and when to temper them with restraint. As these thoughts filled her mind, Aphrodite became aware of other presences approaching her island. Across the darkening waters, she could sense immortal beings drawn by the cosmic disturbance of her birth. The Olympian gods, newly victorious in their war against the Titans, were beginning to take notice of this strange new power that had emerged from the sea. She felt Zeus first, his presence like a storm barely contained, crackling with authority and barely suppressed desire. Even from this distance, she could sense his interest, his hunger to claim this new goddess for his growing pantheon. But there was something else there too, a wariness that suggested he understood the dangerous potential of her power. Hera's presence followed, cold and calculating, already suspicious of any female divine being that might threaten her position as queen of the gods. Aphrodite could feel the older goddess's jealousy like a chill wind across the water, and she knew instinctively that their relationship would be complex and often antagonistic. Other gods approached as well, drawn by curiosity and ambition. Poseidon, claiming kinship through the sea that had birthed her. Apollo, intrigued by her connection to beauty and art. Artemis, already preparing to disapprove of everything Aphrodite represented. Athena calculating how this new goddess might affect the balance of power on Olympus. But there was one presence that felt different from the others, one that approached with neither hunger nor suspicion, but with something that might almost be called friendship. Hermes, the messenger god, the trickster, the one who moved between worlds with easy grace. In his approaching presence, she sensed humor and warmth, a playful spirit that resonated with her own joyful nature. As the first of the divine visitors began to arrive at her shores, Aphrodite made her decision. She would not hide from her destiny or attempt to diminish her power to make others comfortable. She was what she was, love itself, born from the sea's embrace, destined to change the very nature of existence. The gods of Olympus would have to learn to accept her on her own terms. The first to arrive was Hermes, appearing on the beach in a swirl of golden light and laughter. He looked exactly as she had sensed he would, youthful and handsome in a mischievous way, with bright eyes that danced with perpetual amusement and a smile that suggested he found the entire universe endlessly entertaining. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying the music of wind chimes and the rustle of autumn leaves. "So you're the one who's been causing all the commotion. The sea hasn't stopped singing your praises since you emerged, and half the fish in the Mediterranean are composing love songs." Aphrodite smiled, finding his irreverent approach refreshing after the weight of cosmic purpose that had been pressing down on her. "And you must be Hermes. I can feel your curiosity from here. It practically vibrates in the air around you." He laughed, a sound like silver coins falling into a fountain, guilty as charged. "Though I have to say, the stories don't do you justice. They mention the beauty, of course, but they fail to capture the intensity. You're like a star that's decided to take physical form. Beautiful, but also slightly dangerous to look at directly. Is that a warning or a compliment?" "Both, I think." His expression grew more serious, though the twinkle never quite left his eyes. "The others are coming, you know. Zeus is practically salivating at the prospect of adding you to his collection, and Hera is sharpening her claws. They're going to want to define you, categorize you, fit you into their existing power structure." Aphrodite felt a surge of something that was not quite anger, but was certainly defiance. "Let them try. I am not some pretty bauble to be collected or rival to be diminished. I am love itself, and love cannot be contained or controlled." "That's what I was hoping you'd say." Hermes grinned. "This is going to be interesting. Fair warning, though. They're going to test you, push your boundaries, see how far they can bend you to their will. And when that doesn't work," he shrugged eloquently, "when that doesn't work, well, let's just say that gods who can't be controlled are often married off to gods who can be trusted to keep them manageable." The implication hit her like a cold wave. Marriage, not as an expression of love, but as a form of imprisonment, a way to limit her power by binding it to another's will. The very thought made her divine essence recoil in horror. But before she could respond, the air around them began to change. Thunder rumbled across the clear sky, and the scent of ozone filled the air. Zeus was arriving, and he was not coming alone. "Showtime," Hermes murmured, but his voice was kind. "Remember, you're not just beautiful, you're powerful. Don't let them make you forget the difference." The sky split open with a crack of lightning, and the king of the gods descended to her sacred island, bringing with him the full weight of Olympian authority. The very air seemed to bow before his presence, and the flowers in Aphrodite's gardens turned their faces toward him, like worshippers seeking benediction. Zeus was magnificent in the way that storms were magnificent, beautiful and terrible and utterly commanding. His presence filled the space around him like a physical force, demanding attention and submission. When he smiled at her, it was with the confidence of one who had never been refused anything he truly wanted. "Aphrodite," he said, and her name in his voice was like honey and thunder combined. "Born from the sea's embrace, child of chaos and beauty, welcome to the world of the immortals." She inclined her head gracefully, but did not bow. "Zeus, Lord of Olympus, I thank you for your welcome." His eyes, ancient and calculating despite their divine beauty, swept over her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She could feel his desire like heat radiating from a forge, barely contained and utterly selfish. This was not love or even genuine attraction. It was the hunger of a collector who had spotted a rare treasure. "You are everything the stories claimed and more," he continued, moving closer with the confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. "Such beauty should not remain isolated on a distant island. You belong on Olympus, taking your place among the great gods." "And what place would that be?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Zeus's smile grew wider, revealing teeth like polished marble. "Whatever place pleases you, of course, though I confess, I find myself hoping it might be close to mine." The other gods had begun to arrive now, materializing on her beach in displays of divine power that would have terrified mortals, but left Aphrodite merely watchful. Hera came in a chariot drawn by peacocks, her beauty cold and perfect as winter morning. Poseidon rose from the waves themselves, coral crowning his brow, and sea creatures at his command. Apollo descended in a blaze of golden light that rivaled the sun, while Artemis appeared like silver moonlight given form. They arranged themselves in a rough semicircle, ostensibly casual, but actually creating a formation that hemmed her in. Each one studied her with different expressions: desire, suspicion, calculation, curiosity, but all with the same underlying assumption that she was something to be claimed rather than someone to be respected. "She's certainly vivid," Hera said, her voice like poisoned honey. "Though I do hope she understands the importance of proper conduct among civilized deities." "Proper conduct?" Aphrodite's voice carried just a hint of the sea's power, making the waves behind her surge higher. "I was born from violence transformed into beauty, chaos refined into love. I am not civilized, Lady Hera. I am elemental, the queen of the gods." Expression froze, her carefully maintained composure cracking just enough to reveal the rage beneath. "How refreshing. I do hope you'll learn to moderate that enthusiasm once you've had time to understand how things work in the real world." "The real world?" Aphrodite laughed, and the sound made flowers bloom throughout her garden. "This island is more real than your marble halls and golden thrones. Here, love grows wild and free. Here, beauty serves itself rather than politics." Zeus stepped forward, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Enough, Aphrodite. You are a goddess now. with responsibilities and obligations. You cannot simply hide away on this island, playing with flowers and fish. The world needs your gifts, and the gods need your loyalty. The world will have my gifts, she replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. But on my terms, not yours. Love cannot be commanded or controlled, Lord Zeus. It flows where it will, when it will, how it will. The air crackled with tension. Around the circle of gods, she could see varying expressions of shock, approval, and calculation. They had expected her to be cowed by their collective presence, to accept whatever role they assigned her without question. Instead, she was asserting her independence, claiming her right to define herself. It was Athena who spoke next, her voice cool and analytical. You speak of love flowing freely, but love without wisdom is merely chaos. Beauty without purpose is mere vanity. If you truly wish to benefit the world, you must learn to work within established structures. And if those structures seek to cage what should be free, Aphrodite countered. If those purposes serve power rather than passion, I've seen what your wisdom creates, daughter of Zeus. Cold perfection that values order over joy, duty over desire. Athena's gray eyes flashed with anger, but before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Perhaps, said her Hestia, the goddess of hearth and home, who had remained silent until now. We should allow our new sister time to settle into her divinity before demanding she choose sides in old conflicts. Her words carried weight. Hestia was among the most respected of the gods. Her wisdom earned through eons of patient service, rather than dramatic conquest. Even Zeus paused at her intervention. Wisdom speaks, Hermes said, lightly, though his eyes remained fixed on Aphrodite with something that might have been admiration. After all, she's barely finished being born. Surely even gods deserve a honeymoon period. Despite the tension, several of the deities smiled at his wordplay. The moment of levity seemed to break some of the hostile energy that had been building. Zeus, ever the politician, seized the opening. Of course, how thoughtless of us to overwhelm you so soon after such a dramatic entrance into existence. His smile was charming, but calculated. Take your time, beautiful Aphrodite. Explore your powers, understand your nature, but remember, isolation is not strength. Even the mightiest gods benefit from alliance and friendship. It was a retreat disguised as magnanimity, and they both knew it. But it bought her time, which was what she needed most. As the gods began to depart, some reluctantly, others with obvious relief, Aphrodite felt the full weight of what had just occurred. She had declared her independence to the most powerful beings in existence, and while she had won this first skirmish, the war was far from over. Hermes was the last to leave, lingering as the others disappeared in flashes of divine light. That was well done, he said quietly, but you've made enemies today, powerful ones. I've made my position clear, she replied. If that creates enemies, so be it. I will not be diminished to make others comfortable. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. No, I don't think you will. That's what makes you dangerous and valuable. He paused. If you ever need an ally, or just someone who remembers what it's like to be an outsider among the old powers, well, I'm often traveling through this part of the Mediterranean. With that, he was gone, leaving her alone on her transformed island. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Aphrodite walked to the water's edge, where the sea foam still danced in patterns of light. The confrontation had been necessary, but exhausting. She had asserted her independence, but at what cost? The gods of Olympus were not enemies she could afford to ignore, yet neither could she accept the limitations they sought to impose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to define and control her. But tonight, she was alone with her power and her purpose, free to be exactly what she was meant to be. The goddess of love stood on her sacred shore, watching the moon rise over waters that had given her birth, and began to plan her own extraordinary future.